Samantha from Jessima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to create a watercolor using mica powders. Now, I have shown how to do watercolor in the past, but the ones that I have shown usually work with either alcohol inks or more often acrylic paint, and I've had a couple questions on how to make it using mica powders or pastels, and that's what I'm going to show today. So I've got two pieces of Primo polymer clay, black and white, and I've just stacked them on top of each other, and then you're going to trim away the extra clay, and they were both rolled out on the middle setting of my pasta machine, or roughly 1mm thick. Okay, and then just separate out the colours like so. Then, once you've done that, take that and run that back through the middle setting of your pasta machine so that it is 1mm thick in total. Like so. Right, now the next step, more often than not, would be to apply the mica powders. I am going to be adding one extra step in, and that is going to be to apply a variety of different leaves to the clay. Feel free to skip this if you don't want to apply any leaves, just don't apply them and move on to the next step. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those, and I want it so that they can create a little bit of a pattern when we do go to rip this up and create a watercolor from it. And I'm using a bunch of different herbs. These are sage leaves, then I've got some parsley, and I'm just going to lay them out as best I can so that the leaves are sitting nice and flat, like so. Then I have a random leaf. I'm not sure what type this is, but I am going to include it because the veins look quite nice. So just feel free to use whatever leaves you want. It does not need to be anything in particular. I have, what is this called again? I do believe they're called nasturtiums. I might be incorrect on that, but that's another one that I have got. And again, when you're placing these down, make sure that you're placing them down with the vein side facing down. So like for instance, take this one. It looks nice on the front, but if you turn it over, you can see on the back it has a much more prominent pattern. So you want to make sure that that is the part that is facing down onto the clay. Alright, and then once you've finished applying the different leaves, again, you can skip that bit if you want, but then I would recommend just bringing over a piece of paper, and once you're happy with the placement of everything, place that down top, and then use that to burnish those leaves into the clay further, because sometimes it can be a little difficult to do it with your fingers. You could even use a roller after pressing them down slightly. This is just to make sure that they're stuck down well to that clay. Alright, and there we go. That looks quite nice as it is. Then you're going to grab your selection of powders, and I'm using mica powders today, but you can use pastels as well. And you're just going to take those and open them up, and then just pop them to the side. When you open them up, try not to open them on or above your clay, because sometimes accidents happen. I have dropped powders before and then they get all over the clay. So you're going to have to clean it up either way, so it's better that you don't have to clean up off the clay as well. Now I've got a variety of powders here. You can use any colours that you want. These are the ones that I'm going with. Then grab a nice fluffy brush, and I'm going to start with what I want the dominant colours to be, and that's the greens. I'm going to take that, and I'm actually just going to splash it around like so. And if I get that on the leaves, that's okay as well, because I am going to be brushing it around, so it doesn't matter if it gets on the leaves. Then I'll move on to the next colour that I like, which is this nice apple green colour. And then just continue doing this essentially across the whole surface. Okay, And there we go. And I've been a little sparing with the orange colour and the gold, because those I want to be just a hint in there when I'm done. I don't want it to be too much, but again, that's just my way of applying the colours. It's going to look different depending on the colours that you want, and whichever ones you want to be dominant colours. Right, then always close these before moving on to the next step, because again, accidents happen. Then take this and tap across the surface. Don't brush, you'll mix the colours together too much that way. If you tap, you'll lightly blend everything, but you'll end up with a much more stippled pattern with distinct areas of different colours. And you're just going to do that across the whole surface, like so. Okay, and then once you've done that, then very important step is to grab a piece of paper again and give this a burnish, and this is going to work those powders down and into the clay so that they stick, because the powders create a very non-stick surface. So for instance, when we go to put the translucent over the top like we usually would with this technique, it can cause problems. So I am going to be making allowances for that. So one of those is that I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of extra powders on the surface of the clay, and the powders that are on the surface need to be stuck down into the clay, almost so that you can kind of have little bits of clay sticking up through the powder, and it just creates a more sticky surface, I guess. Alright, and that will have burnished it down. It also means that you don't necessarily have to apply a layer of translucent, you just want to seal it later. This makes sure that the powders aren't really loose on the surface. Then, I'm going to take a nice poofy brush, and I'm going to brush away any excess powder that might be on the surface like this. And it's okay to do this now because I've burnished that powder down and it's stuck to the surface of the clay. This is just to get rid of any extra powder so that, again, we don't have any more than we need. Alright, here we go. Then you want to go ahead and lift up all of your leaves, and that's going to leave you with some nice white clay underneath. Okay, and you just lift those up. You don't want that stuck on the clay. And I'm not too worried if I get powder on the white, because I don't plan on leaving it pure white. I am actually going to do something like this, where I use that brush to just brush over the surface. And what this will do is we don't have a lot of extra powder, but we have just enough that it will highlight the texture while still keeping it brighter than the outside. And that is optional. If you want to keep it white, then just be careful not to touch it until you get the translucent on top. Okay, and you can use a craft knife to help you lift these up. Alright, and I'm just going to do that for all of them, and then I am going to brush over all of them, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, and there we go. That's how it should look. Then you're going to grab a piece of translucent. Now, I've rolled that out, and you want to do it fresh. So don't have it pre-rolled out. You want to do that as you've just finished the last step, because you want it to be nice and sticky. And get it as thin as possible. Don't worry if, don't worry if you've got ripples in it. That's perfectly fine. You want it just as thin as possible. And also you want the clay to be fairly sticky. So if you feel like your translucent is kind of a little dry, a little crumbly, and it doesn't feel like it, like look how flexible that is. It needs to be able to be like that, where you can just kind of move it around. Almost like a, if you've ever done rice paper wraps, it should kind of feel like that after it's been soaking in the water. If it's not sticky like that, then the next step's going to be a little harder, and I would actually advise adding a little bit of translucent liquid clay to the translucent if you can, to make it stickier. You mix it into the translucent so that the translucent is just generally more sticky. And then you smooth that down onto the surface. The trick is sticky translucent equals better adhesion. Alright, then you smooth that over like so, trying to get rid of as many air bubbles as possible. You're not going to get rid of all of them, that's perfectly fine. If you end up with some trapped like here, actually I went too far, and that's going to end up being a double layer, that's fine. But if you do have one, like I've got one right there, you can just take your knife, slit across, and then push it out. And just spend your time going through here, making sure you don't have air bubbles, because air bubbles are places where the clay has not adhered to clay, and those can cause trouble later down the line. So just make sure to spend some time getting everything stuck together. Alright, now the next step is going to be to give this the biggest burnish you possibly can, because if you can see right here, you can see that the translucent's actually lifting up from the clay, the bottom clay anyway, because of the mica powder, and we don't want that. So take this and force the two pieces of clay to become friends. They need to be stuck together. And you could even use your roller to do this. You can go in and give it a good burnish. And don't put this through your pasta machine, because the rollers will stick to the translucent and pull it away from the other layer of clay. At this point you really want to only be doing stuff by hand, because then you can prevent things like that. Alright, and there we go. And then you're going to continue on the other side and just continue burnishing. The more you do this, the better the two pieces of clay are going to bond together, and the less trouble they're going to give you down the line. Okay, and there we go. I also trimmed away the extra translucent around the edges. Then you're going to pick this up off your tile and just use your blade to help you with that. Okay, and then before placing it back down, just give it a quick clean, like so. I'm using a glazed ceramic tile. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a stretch by hand. I'm not putting it through the machine, as I said. You can easily stretch it like so. And honestly, the biggest thing with this is you want to just work with clay that is nice and soft, because then you don't really need things like pasta machines as much as you usually would, because you can do a lot of it by hand. Like so. And just give it nice stretches. Alright, and this is pretty much thin enough anyway to start the technique. I don't want to stretch the pattern out too much because we'll lose the leaves. Alright, now the important thing to know is what you want to do with it before you start ripping that up and assembling it. I'm going to be making a bracelet, so I'm going to make sure that I am making something that is in the shape of this. So that's the thought process behind the shape that I am making. And I am going to split this like so, because it's a lot to work with, and I'm not going to try to assemble it all so that it's all exactly the same. I just want the leaf veins to be visible. I don't need them to be all assembled exactly the same. And then you're just going to rip and pop it together. And really you should be fine with this so long as you don't put it through the pasta machine, because those rollers will stick to this top layer of translucent and will pull everything apart. So I generally don't put things through the pasta machine if I can help it, because it takes away a certain level of control. Because if you're using a acrylic roller and rolling across the surface and you see the translucent starting to come up, then you can stop and you can place it back down using a piece of paper to just gently burnish it, and you can fix the problem. Whereas with the pasta machine, even if you do notice the problem, there's no way to really get it out of the pasta machine without kind of reversing it, and then it causes more problems. So general rule of thumb, if it's a veneer and you want to put it through the machine, if you don't have to, don't do it. Anyway, just continue ripping and placing pieces together like so, until it forms a veneer that is to the size of your liking. Okay, and there we go, just about done. Now, I am going to again take a piece of paper, just bear with me one moment, and I'm going to flatten this. Now, when you're burnishing, what you want to do is you want to go against the grain of the watercolor. So if you were to go this way, which is with the grain, you're going to be flattening these pieces out, therefore hiding the black and white stripes. And that might be an effect that you want, but generally with this technique you want to have those highlighted as much as possible. So you want to actually be going again against the grain, pressing this way. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring out the striping. And if you've got areas like over here where the grain's a little tricky, just go in with your finger first and get most of the flattening done, and then go in with the piece of paper. Okay, and then I'll just pop that over, and this is just really to prevent my roller from sticking when I go to burnish it. And I'm just going to go against the grain like so. And you can use your fingers or you can use your roller like this. And keep doing this until your piece is nice and flat. Okay, and there we go. And I've transferred it to a piece of paper. I'm just going to lift that up and flip it over. And it's not quite as thick as I'd want it for the bracelet, so I'm going to take a piece of black Primo polymer clay, and this was rolled out on the middle setting, so it's about 1mm thick. Just going to take that and burnish that on as well, just where I plan to cut the bracelet out, so that it's thick enough for my bracelet. Now, if you didn't want to make a bracelet and just wanted to make earrings or a pendant, you could add a backing if you wanted to, or you could skip this step completely. Right, and there we go. And I've just burnished it so that it's got a nice smooth finish. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to reburnish it onto that piece of paper, and I am going to cut out the veneer or slab on a piece of paper so that the back keeps that nice matte burnish that we've got. It might stick in the cutter a little bit, but especially since this is quite a large cutter, that should not be a problem. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to press down with even force, and then once you've got that, you can then even take a roller, and this helps distribute more pressure without hurting your hands, like so. Now just make sure that I've got everything pressed down, because I want a nice clean cut the first time, and then lift this up. That's a good way to see if you've got a clean cut. I'll just put that to the side, and what you want to do with this, you can cut out more pieces from here if you want to, or you could chop that up and use it as a mosaic scrap piece. Lots of things you could do with that. Bring this back over, and it is probably going to stick in the cutter. Just going to lift it up like so, and that will give a nice clean finish on both sides. Then just lift that up off the piece of paper, and you might see a little bit of fluff around the edges, so just go and gently tap that in as well. That will get cleaned up with a very quick mild sand, and you can see the back is nice and matte too, so very minimal cleanup. Then you're going to either want a jar, or if you happen to have it, a cuff blank. Any cuff blank will work. And just take this and place that down onto whatever you want as the shape. And just wrap it around like so, and try to get it to stick so that it stays in place. And the way I do that is I will hold it and then gently smooth it over, and this is coming over the edge a little, so bring that back out a little, but just move it around till you're happy. And once you've got it stuck down, then it's going to go into the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature, and that's going to clear up the translucent. It's going to harden the piece up, and then we can go in with a quick sand and clean it all up and then seal it. Also, if you are looking for a bracelet blank, I got mine off of eBay. There are lots of different types on there, but again, you can just use a jar. And if you are interested in the cutter that I used, I make and sell them myself on my Etsy store, Jessima Design. There will be a link to that in the description below. But there we go, that should be just about ready. I like to go over and smooth it because that gets rid of any fingerprints as well. There, you'll just pop that just like that into the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature, and then we're going to sand it. Okay, and here it is out of the oven. And you can see that if you use a bangle with a texture on it, the back will take on that texture to a degree. So if you don't want that to happen, then don't use a bangle with texture, or you can sand that off if you want. I actually quite like it. Now, I am going to bring over some polishing papers, and they start from 400 and go all the way up to an 8000 grit, and I'm going to use this to bring the piece up to a shine. I am going to skip the 400 grit and just start immediately on the grey, which, if I remember correctly, is a 600 grit. And I'm just going to sand the front. Now, I don't want to bring this to a super shiny finish today. I want it to be more like a satin shine. But if you want it to be nice and shiny, then by all means do what you need to get it to that shine. Generally that would involve sanding it all the way to the 8000 grit, which I am going to do, and then buffing, which is what I am going to skip. Okay, and when you are sanding, just anytime you are working with clay that has a translucent layer over a mixed media layer, you need to just keep an eye out while you're sanding, because sometimes you can sand completely through the translucent layer of clay and break through to the layer underneath that, which in this case holds the mica powders, and if that happens you end up sanding that away, and that's just sad when that happens. So just keep an eye out when you're sanding, because at that moment, if that happens, then you need to stop sanding and then maybe apply a varnish instead. But yeah, basically you're just going to repeat the process that I'm doing right now, going up through the different grits until you reach your desired shine, and then if you want it to be even shinier, you can grab a buffing wheel and a rotary tool and give it an extra buff that way, but I'm not going to do that today. And there we go. And this is the shine that you should get just off of the sandpapers. I haven't done any kind of buffing or anything along those lines. Now, something that you can do if you want it in between a rotary tool buff and just this finish, you can actually take any kind of fabric. I'm just using the sleeve of my jacket right now, and you can go over and just run over it nice and fast as you can, and that will actually give you a very, very light buff, and it's a good in between if you wanted that. Okay, and there we go. Now, I'm not going to attach a clasp to this. You absolutely could if you feel like this is going to flex around too much. Like you can see, it does flex a bit here, but that's because it's quite warm from all of the sanding and stuff. My environment generally is quite cold, so I don't have trouble with bracelets slipping off. But if you are worried about it doing that, you can always drill a hole over here, and then pop a clasp on. Another thing I did want to point out as well, for a different shape, if you were interested when baking this, is you wouldn't be able to do it on a bracelet blank, but if you got a large jar, you could actually take this and you could bake it like this, and this would give you a completely different bracelet shape, which I think looks quite nice. So that is definitely an option. But yeah, let me just shift that back into place. But yeah, I might attach a clasp. Do I want to attach a clasp? No, I'll leave it exactly the way it is. I quite like it the way it is. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the tutorial. Mostly I wanted to discuss how to do a watercolor technique with mica powders. You can actually tell the difference between the mica powders and the pastels Pastels give you a much more matte look. They will give you the same kind of soft, healthy tone, but the mica powders, I'm not sure how well the camera can pick it up, but they do give you a nice shine that mica powders classically give, and you can see that through the translucent, if the translucent is nice and thin. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you have requests for future tutorials, or maybe things that you're having trouble with, leave them in the comments below, and I will either make a tutorial from it, or I'll try to answer it as best I can in the comments section. And if you like the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing, as that helps the channel out and reaches more polymer players like you. And if you'd like to support the channel further, there is a join button just below the video where you can become a member. There's also a link in the description to my Patreon account. They both have exclusive tutorials that I don't share on YouTube, and are a great way to learn some more complex techniques while also supporting the channel. But yeah, that is pretty much it. I do hope that you enjoyed it. I had quite a bit of fun. This is a nice springy or summery bracelet that you can use. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I do hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.